Was vertical takeoff that dangerous?
Everything in this airplane's dangerous. The jet was unforgiving in that moment.
People don't realize what a 1,000-pound bomb will do.
Were there any named dogfight maneuvers?
If we're doing air-to-air, 7 layers of defense have failed.
I don't remember turning on the master arm switch.
You're consuming fuel at a rate that is unknown to most airplanes.
Hi, I'm Stewart Bailey, the curator here at Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum. And today we are going to be talking with 2 retired AV-8B Harrier pilots, Captain Frank Pugs Smith and Lieutenant Colonel Luke Warren Jacobs. We're getting an inside look at nearly 40 years of the jump jet, exploring the complex S-VTOL systems, carrier operations, and the first ever U.S. Harrier combat mission. This one is going to be cool. It's time to go behind the wings. Before we get into today's video, I want to remind you that we have a Patreon page where you can get exclusive content and support Wings' educational mission. Check out the details in the description. Now, with that all out of the way, let's get on into it. Between the two of you, you've seen the entire history of the AV-8B. For those who don't know anything about it, help introduce this airplane for us.
For me, I got involved in '88, got winged and got assigned Harriers, which was the day attack, which you see behind you is the radar bird. So it was pretty much just a light attack, kind of a dump truck. It was the replacement to the A4, and it was the Marine Corps' way to go forward with VSTOL to get it on a ship, get it closer to the battlefield, and have it for CAS, close air support. So I got into it brand new off the seat, smelled new, the earlier model.
I got my wings in 2003. So I kind of caught the Harrier post-Desert Storm. His generation set our generation up for success. So I walked into VMA T203, the RAG, the training squadron, and we had day attacks in it, night attacks, and radar birds.
Every aircraft has its own personality. How would you describe the jump jet?
It's like flying a Dragon. It has a lot of thrust, it moves, and it'll do pretty much anything you want till you kind of don't do what it likes, and then it will talk to you. Getting off the ground in 300 feet and accelerating to 400 plus knots by the end of the runway. I think it had the best acceleration rate of any tactical aircraft.
You had to fly this airplane from the moment you started the engine to the moment you shut it down. Even fully loaded in 1,000 feet, I mean, I hit triple nickel at the end of the runway in Yuma, so 555 knots by the end of the runway. She'll move, and then she'll talk back to you too. And there's moments in my career I can remember distinctly where I thought I figured it out, and then she reminded me who the boss was.
There's not a trainer as such that gets you ready for
There is.
this.
It's a TAV-8, and I was an instructor at 203. We called that the Dragon Wagon, so it was a little bit different. It's got a second canopy, and it was a great airplane to get people introduced to it. So the TAV-8 would allow a guy to kind of get a couple takeoffs under his belt, watch the nozzles as you got on from coming off the ground and getting onto wingborne, and then coming back in and maybe transition from wingborne to jetborne flight. Wasn't as stable or peppy because it had a little bit longer nose.
I graduated with the T-45. I never flew the A4. T-45, I think, had like 7,000 pounds of static thrust. You went from that, and then 2 weeks later, I was flying this with 22,000. And it's almost similar to a cat off the boat.
This is the first production jet to be able to take off and land vertically. What was it like flying it?
I remember my very first flight in the Harrier. First day, I was flying with this guy. His call sign was Mookie. Get ready. Oh, by the way, don't hit the throttle so hard that you throw the thrust limiters.
Yeah, the limiter switch.
The limiter switch. And I was like, it's fine. I know what I'm doing. And sure as there is the sun coming up in the east, I slam it in the corner and I get the limiters, which gives the engine a little bit more juice. We take off and we hit about 480 knots at the end of the runway. We just parked the nose. We were going as fast as I had ever gone in an airplane, and that was the quickest 1 hour flight and then culminated in a vertical landing. If I wasn't already hooked, I was absolutely hooked.
Yeah, same for me, although like you said, it was a little bit different. So when you get aboard, the XO takes you out for your first flight, and the guys are laughing while I'm going out, and I'm going, God dang, what's up? And all he says, stay on my wing. And I'm like, okay. And all he proceeded to do was stow, go, fly. We did aerobatics in formation and did everything. Barrel rolls, loops, and brake, come in to hover. And he just walks in with his gear and says, put him on the schedule. And I'm like, was that my checker? And the guys are laughing. From the day one, you carried 500-pound bombs. You carried everything tactically you could carry on the airplane, and you just learned to tactically employ it.
Frank, you flew both the A4 and the Harrier. How do they compare?
Small, lightweight, carried a pretty good sized bomb load. I think the Harrier beat it in a lot of the things that the Marine Corps wanted. And that was more bomb loads, more capability, and more radios. The A4 was funny because when you went to the 180, you had to add power. You would turn the airplane, you'd have to add power. Flying the A4, I remember doing some cross countries with the tanks, you'd trim it up, get it all set, and it would just drop to a wing. And you would trim it again to put it in the other, and it dropped to the other wing. So you're like, you're fighting that, and you're kind of like, oh shoot, I've trimmed everything I can, let's just go, I'll go. We had A4 guys come back and go to Harriers. We had AV-8A guys who were the original Harrier guys come back and do the B. So we had a good blend of people that flew in the squadron.
Tell us a little bit more about the VSOL, the vertical short takeoff and landing.
So the big thing, I think, if you follow the history of the Marine Corps, the P1127 and then to the Kestrel in the three countries they did, Germany, the United States, and Britain, to get that concept was the United States Marine Corps wanted VSTOL. They wanted to have that capability fixed wing and be able to get it off the ship with ordnance, time to loader, and support the ground units. The only thing you would have would be the Cobra, which is a great airframe, but you wanted something a little more speed, a little bit higher altitude, maybe some more capability. They had the Harrier, now you can do 20 miles. They got the LCAT, which was the hovercraft. Now you can do 40 miles of beach. And then once you got the V-22, you got 400 miles or 200 miles of beach. So the VSTOL it met everything they wanted to do.
And Luke, can you tell us about carrier operations?
The first time you go to the boat is in the fleet. So we go in and you come in for the overhead, and it's different. T-45, A4, you only have two controls, the stick and the throttle. And you throw the hook down. The difference is you come in a Harrier, you would take your hand, slam it to the hover stop, which is 82 degrees, while you're doing the flaps, getting the gear down, getting everything ready to go. You stay abeam the ship. You parallel the course of the ship by about one wing's length. And then once the LSO, the guy in the tower says, cleared to cross, you then had to get this airplane to kind of move at a 45-degree angle while you're slowing down. And you time it out so then you're not moving. Maybe 1 or 2 knots, and you're pacing yourself with the ship. And then we had these lights called the hover position indicator. And you would take your head about 45 degrees and you would move the jet so the red light was on top of the green lights, and then they'd say you're clear to land. And then you pull the power, get the rate of descent coming, and then you would catch it with about half the power, and then you would land. And the second you landed, you had to snap it to idle. The jet was unforgiving in that moment. That last 10 feet, you had to have the feel. Like, it wasn't a lot of science, it was a lot of art.
Was vertical takeoff that dangerous?
It's fun. Yeah, it's dangerous. Everything in this airplane's dangerous. The big thing about Harrier is that she's a FOD machine. And that was, I think, the Achilles heel of the jet. And a hover, we're at 30,000 RPM. And a blade starts liberating, and you gotta remember the engine is surrounded by fuel tanks and hydraulic pumps and hydraulic lines and bombs and guns and your butt. So we really don't want blade liberation to happen. I think the VTO, the vertical takeoff, is awesome. I did a couple air shows doing it. Tactically, it's not practical. If you had any ordnance on the jet, you would take off so low on gas, you better hope the tanker was right overhead and you didn't miss the basket, because you would be probably on fumes by the time you hit the basket. You're burning a VTO is about 275 pounds a minute. You're consuming fuel at a rate that is unknown to most airplanes.
So think about that, 60 pounds per minute is 3,600 pounds an hour. So when you're up into the hover, you're just sipping gas. You would rather stow off, take as much ordnance, then come back and land vertically, or rolling vertical landing.
It's way more complex than just taking off landing for us. Like, it was like, how much wind's over the deck? What's the humidity? What are all the conditions to get this jet off the deck? And once you got up and away, it's just a normal airplane.
So now you're qualified as a Harrier guy?
That's right, let's go. Let's go for a sortie.
Let's go.
I got this.
Okay, well, a listener had asked, were there any named dogfight maneuvers that created thanks to being able to vector thrust?
Biffing is the only term I can think of, or some unpleasant words that I don't think I can say.
It had some good things to probably avoid getting gunned.
If we're doing air-to-air, quite frankly, 7 layers of defense have failed. When I was doing air-to-air training, I just stayed off of it. Better just fighting a good jet and saving that for, like, I'm in deep trouble, but yeah.
All right, so we'll move on from sexy dogfighting names.
No, it's not sexy dogfighting.
Tell us a little bit about life below deck. You mentioned the maintainers, the crews. I mean, some pretty special people work on those.
Amazing people. He was an aircraft maintenance officer. I was an aircraft maintenance officer for 2 years. This aircraft doesn't go without the Marines, you know, and you gotta remember the Marine Corps is the youngest service. The average age of an enlisted Marine is 21 years old. So you've got 18, 19-year-old Marines working on a $25 million airplane. So 40 man hours to get one jet ready to go for 1 hour of flight time.
And the pull-in engine was 500 man hours. And on a rolling ship, remember, it sits like this, you've got to level it. And then to pull it out 2 to 3 inches, you've got to take that whole wing and everything off and set it down. And then 2 or 3 Marines to pull that thing out. So it takes quite a bit to keep it maintained.
We're going to talk combat now. Let's go back to January 17th,
Okay.
1991, during the Gulf War. You flew the very first combat mission of a U.S. Harrier. What was going through your mind as this whole thing unfolded?
So as we got through July, we had manned up and protected them coming down Safe Kuwait. Usually you flew 6 days, 2 missions, and you would go through an alert phase. And I happened to be that morning the alert division. So basically we had already briefed. The weapons and ordnance was ready. A little bit of intel was just there was an artillery position that opened up because the war was kicking off. They attacked a Marine position and I believe killed 2 Marines and a corpsman. And everything combat check wise, spin up and go, you're off the ground pretty quick. Probably within 5 to 6 minutes. It was pretty easy talking to the OV-10, pretty easy to see the artillery position, and then basically you've got 4 Harriers coming in to attack. We were carrying at that time 2 winders, gun pack, 300 rounds, and then 4 1,000-pound bombs, which is a lot. That day was pretty much overcast. We're about 7,200 feet. Roll in, get the symbology. If you saw the other 2 far down were broke, you would come down, maybe shoot in a little bit better. And then once we got the 1,000-pounders off, we tipped over a couple of the artillery pieces, did quite a bit of damage. And I think people don't realize what a 1,000-pound bomb will do. 5 to 6 minutes, we had done quite a bit of damage. The funny thing that I remember most is I don't remember turning on the master arm switch. And I did it instinctively. And it's just like, holy shoot. Kind of a privilege, but we had briefed as a team for probably 3 or 4 months before we had done that because we were waiting for everybody to come in theaters, and I just flew with great guys, just lucky as heck.
Wow, I did. Awesome story, dude.
Yeah. Now, Luke, fast forward a bit to your time in Afghanistan. What kind of missions were you flying, and how did the Harrier perform under those conditions?
Afghanistan was unique. It's high. It's I think it's about 5,000 feet. It's hot. Once we got in country, we landed the jet. Next morning, I take off, and actually my first mission in Afghanistan was with 2 Hornets because we were doing a changeover with a Marine Hornet squadron. We had sanctuary, so we stayed above 10,000 feet. And instead of finding targets visually, which we could do, we had a lightning pod, which I could see a guy walking around about 15 miles. And the lightning pod can also transmit the signal, like a TV broadcast. So the JTAC on the ground literally had this device that he could flip out of his chest, and he had a screen. Rule 1, Harriers, don't drop without cleared hot.
Yeah.
I had my thumb tucked in and they said cleared hot. I just went hot, dropped, and that problem was taken care of. And I never left 18,000 feet. I dropped that bomb probably 5 miles away. In the JDAM, you have to hold the button for about 3 seconds. Basically, it takes all the data from the jet and it has to physically squirt it into the bomb. So you have to hold that thing and it feels like forever. So that's another cool thing about the Harriers. We can manipulate the fusing airborne. Totally different environment, totally different fight, the way that we did it.
How did it fit into those mixed package missions?
Typically, we would be the strike package, so like most of the strike package was fighter guys that were pushing forward, trying to eliminate the airborne threat. And then you've got the EA-6B trying to jam. So they were kind of like the picket for us. And then we would just wait until they're like, hey boys, we're good. We're significantly slower than an F-16. We were just one small part typically of a package.
I know how excited they were at Wings when the Harrier came. It's got a great legacy. When you look back, what does the Harrier community mean to you?
You're a Marine first. Your goal is to do close air support, to try to get that weapon on station. So I think it was a great thing from a helicopter point where you had the gunships to where you got fixed wing where you could carry weapons a little deeper. So legacy-wise, I think it was a concept that came to fruition. It was a great intermediate step to the F-35.
One of the big things from the Harrier then was highest turn rate. You could get the aircraft, land it, turn it, and get it back out in the fight. Reliable, weapons on target. I was looking at that legacy when I got the Harrier. I was like, wow, that's a lot. And then having 20 years as a Harrier guy, almost all of it at war in 2 fronts, I think the Harrier lived up to that legacy and added to the great legacies of these squadrons. If you ask me how I think the Harrier should be remembered, not the prettiest watch that you've ever owned, but it kept good time. I'm very fortunate to be just a small part of that legacy.
Frank, Pugs Smith, Luke, Warren, Jacobs, thanks for joining us. It was a treat
for
having
having
the
us.
two of you here with us today.
Well, that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed all the great stories from Frank and Luke. Which was your favorite? Let us know in the comments below. And to hear the full interview, check out episode 64 on the Behind the Wings podcast. If you subscribe, thank you. And if you don't, well, just subscribe already. And come to the museum and see the Harrier alongside more than 60 air and spacecraft in our historic World War II era hangar. And we'll see you next time on Behind the Wings. Now I got to get off back to work. See ya.